not my whole story, of which some of you may already know. I mean, it's interesting to think that us are being judged on fragments of information, most often that we provide. I mean, whether it's, I don't know, a resume or the outfit we choose to wear, or by what others say about us, or perhaps it's the color of our skin, or our choice of partners, our country of origin, or even our political affiliations. How many of us really get to tell the whole story? You know, in an age when 1 in 4 educational institutions are turning away from using the SAT, ACT tests as a measurement for college success, seems we should be looking at something more meaningful. Wouldn't you agree? And this is with the added challenge that we are physically more distant in this new coronavirus abnormal, with more people working and studying remotely. How do we find ways to bring us closer together? I'm obviously not physically in a room with you, so I can't physically visually tell if you are present. I mean, I could see your little box, but I can't really feel your presence. I can't, I don't know, read the room accurately as people who speak, perform, or do stand-up describe as a vital part of presenting live. I thought about adding a laugh track to my presentation, but I decided I didn't want to force the issue. Also, what's funny to me might not be to you. Virtually, whether it's, I don't know, the doorbell ringing, or addictive texting, or your children are crying, or you're worrying about the way we look on screen, or what our houses look like, or your dog demanding attention, or let's say you're eating dinner. Perhaps you live in a busy neighborhood. There's a lot of potential distractions that didn't exist prior. And since many of us are currently using computers as the primary device to communicate, how many people also still have their, I don't know, their email open, or are surfing another browser window, or, I don't know, are editing a document? So here's the big question. How in the world can you grab and keep someone's virtual attention surrounding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Now, here's a topic that, for better or worse, most often folks respond negatively to. A topic, by the way, which extensive research has proven increases productivity, ingenuity, and workplace satisfaction. Well, tonight, I'm going to offer you a meaningful method to overcome these obstacles. It's called intergroup contact theory. Yeah, I know, sounds academic, right? Intergroup contact theory is the proven model. It's a proven theory. Its premise is that by sharing our personal stories across majority and minority populations, we can break down prejudices that exist between us by discovering that we have a lot more in common than we have different. It's true. We have more in common than we have different. And I don't know, this seems like a natural segue to tell you my personal story, which I'm going to call, well, I tell you what, I'm going to steal this from the late Brandon Tartikoff. If you remember him, the former president of NBC television. Let's call this must-see TV. This is must-see TV. So for the past 15 years, I've been traveling around the country to high schools, colleges, corporations and government agencies, law firms, as well as not-for-profits, telling my personal story in the form of a one-man play. That's right, you heard that correctly, a one-man play. Over the course of about 50 minutes, I portray over a dozen different characters from my life and family as I act out the true tale of the search to find my biological father. Again, some of you may already know my story. Some may have heard snippets, or taken a peek online, but my story exposes a family secret, one kept hush for a long time while growing up in a white working class family. But really, what family doesn't have a secret? So my little secret began to unravel on a hot, sunny day while living near the beach in Los Angeles. Now, that morning, I received a call from my sister informing me that after 25 years of marriage, our parents were getting a divorce. Now, my sister and I, we share a biological mother, but our father, her biological father, adopted me when I was 5, which was almost 4 years before my sister was born. So for you math nerds, that makes me almost 9 years older than my half sister. Anyway, although I was in my early 30s at the time of the phone call, I was rocked by the divorce announcement. You see, I knew I had another father, a biological father, or I don't know, bio dad for short. But my mother had never spoken about it. The simple story that I'd been told was that my mom got pregnant when she was young. She had me, got married, then left my father when I was 2, returned home to live with her parents, divorced my bio dad, and then eventually remarried and had 2 more kids. She failed to tell me anything about my biological father up to this point. And I was mostly a scared kid and I'd been too afraid to ask. So now I found myself in the midst of a divorce between my parents, wondering about my bio dad. I mean, who was he? How did she meet him? What was he like? Where was his family? What happened? So I sought more answers from my mother, and it was during a phone conversation with her that she revealed his name was John Sidney Woods, and that she had last spoken to him some 30 years ago while he was living in the Detroit area. Armed with just these 2 fragments of information, I set out for the library, or what might be called the original Google. After all, this was the age before we used the internet for everything. And I made my way to the reference section. Now, libraries were stocked with the device that ancient civilizations used to find people: the phone book. I selected the Detroit phone book. I looked up his name, and then I copied down the 5 listings I discovered. I dashed from the library 6 blocks to my home in a daze, just wondering, how would I go about the next step of my quest? When I arrived home, which was an apartment about the size of a walk-in refrigerator, or in our new pandemic parlance, about the size of this computer, I paced the 3 steps across and 2 steps back my hovel would allow me, attempting to calm my nerves. What if I found him? What would I say? What if he didn't want to speak with me? What if none of the names on this list were my father? I needed to make a call, a phone call that I was frankly scared to death to make. You know what? I'm going to show you that moment from the play. Bear with me, and I will share my screen and show you that moment.
Finally, I grabbed the phone and punched the top number of my list in, my heart pounding. I heard the phone ring twice, and then a click. Hello? Hi. I'm looking for a John Sidney Woods. You're speaking with him. Did you live in the Boston area in 1957?
Yes, I did.
Were you married to woman by the name of Adrian Pilibosian?
Yes, I was.
My dad. First time, 30 years later. I didn't even hear what he said next. My name is Michael Fosberg and I'm your son. I suddenly remembered horror stories about kids who had found their parents after many years missing, and then the parent didn't want to have anything to do with them. It's all right if you don't want to talk to me. I just called to find out how you're doing and let you know it's doing all right. My whole body was vibrating.
No! My God, son, how are you? Where are you?
I'm fine. I'm good. I live in Los Angeles.
And, your mother? How is she?
Oh, well, she's pretty good, I guess.
What do you mean, you guess?
Well, she just got a divorce and we're not in the best of terms right now.
Just remember, son, she's the only mother you've got. Don't be too hard on her.
So, how about you? What's your life been like?
Well, I've been working for Ford Motor Company for the past 20 years as a purchasing agent. Before that, I was with Chrysler Corporation. I've been married for 25 years to a woman named Sue, and we have no children.
30 years wrapped up in a couple of brief descriptions.
You know, son, there's a couple of things you should know I'm sure your mother's never told you.
Like what?
Well, first of all, you should know that no matter what you were told or what you thought happened, I've always loved you and thought of you a lot.
For the first time, my father, my dad, my biological procreator, my blood told me he loved me.
There's one other thing I'm sure your mother's never told you.
What?
I'm African American.
My body went numb. I felt lightheaded. I was standing next to my bureau and my body just sank. I braced myself with my left hand while I continued to hold the phone with my right. I felt very warm.
Your grandparents are Roy and Lois Woods, descendants of the Woods and Robinsons family from Columbia and Jefferson City, Missouri, and have been living for the past 40 years in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Wow. That's all I could manage.
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm great. You're right. She never bothered to mention that.
Your grandfather was the chairman of the science and engineering departments at Norfolk State University, and the science building is named after him. There are unconfirmed stories in the family that his great-grandfather, Al Woods, was first cousins with John Brown. Your great-great-grandfather was a member of the 54th Regiment in the Colored Infantry in the Civil War. Your grandmother's father, Charles Lefty Robinson, was once an all-star pitcher in the Negro Leagues. Your grandmother has 4 siblings, all still alive and well.
I didn't know what to say. I couldn't formulate words, let alone sentences. I went from growing up in a white, working-class family to being a black man in the blink of an eye. I strained to put them together. What do they look like? What does he look like? Do I look like him?
I am very light-skinned and have been told that I could almost pass for white. But like most black families, there are all sorts of shades in our blood. Look, I'll put together a couple of photographs for you, send me away. Maybe you could do the same.
Say, listen, Dad, you do want to keep in touch, don't you?
Absolutely, son. I've been hoping you'd get in touch at some point in your life. I was just never sure when it would be. I half expected you years ago when you're in your 20s. Look, we've got lots to talk about and plenty of time to do it.
We hung up the phone. Damn. The puzzle was now whole. All my life I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me when there was nothing wrong with me at all. I'm black, damn it, I'm black, and I knew it all along. Ow! Woo! I'm black, I'm proud, woo!
Well, as you can imagine, my mind was on overload trying to sort through all the implications. And then I started in the what ifs and if onlys. If only I had known before I fill out applications for college. What if my British girlfriend wouldn't accept my newfound blackness? How do I go about telling my family? What about my friends? How would they see me now? More importantly, how do I see myself? Have I changed? Am I different? What am I? Let's take another look at the challenges I pose to the audiences at the end of the play. I'm going to share that with you now.
Finally, I grabbed the phone and...
Oh, wrong one.
Did you know when you first saw me? Did you guess? When I first made the discovery, did you start to look at me differently? Did my nose flatten out? Did my lips get bigger? How did your perceptions change? And how many different perceptions might there be out there amongst you between blacks and whites? Look, I'm just a guy who went out to search for his dad. For 30 years, my sole sense of history, of self, was the rich Armenian heritage my mother's parents surrounded me with. You know, I asked my mother about that time in Boston when her mother came out secretly visiting us while my father was away at work. Upon seeing our impoverished situation, she begged us to return home with her. What if I'd had darker skin, Mom? We probably would never have returned home to live with my parents. Our lives would have been entirely different. In the end, I was not raised black. I did not live through the black experience. I was not a target of racism, was not singled out because of the color of my skin, was not turned away from or called names. Does that make me any less a black man? Did you have to have that experience to be black? All my life I've worn a disguise, a mask of identity. Incognito is defined in the dictionary as an adverb meaning with the real identity concealed, with one's identity hidden or unknown. So what am I now? Who am I? What box have I been checking off on applications or the census? Caucasian, African American, mixed, biracial, multiracial, mulatto, octoroon, high yellow? How about AAA, African American Armenian? Is there a box for that? More importantly, do I need a box to fit in? Frankly, I've got too much family, too much history, too much culture to stuff my roots in some box. I slide between worlds, between cultures, experiencing everything on both sides. I live in between. I walk both sides. A box doesn't tell you who I am. I'm more than a label. I'm more than a race. I'm a kid with 2 dads, 3 heritages. I am Michael Sidney Piliposian Woods Fosberg.
The picture is now complete.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, I've had the good fortune to have traveled the country for the past 15 plus years, sharing my own personal story in an effort to facilitate dialogue about issues of race and identity. By using the idea of storytelling through the means of the arts, a one-man play, I've been able to create dialogues with people about the uncomfortable topics of race, identity, diversity, stereotypes, and inclusion. But not everybody perceives the play in the same way. Some people may judge the Black characters as racially offensive. Some may think the use of the African statue, the James Brown music, the mention of college applications and other cultural references are negative racial stereotypes. And then there are those who have seen the entire play and may be confused as to how someone could judge these things in that way. Let's be clear. I did not hang up the phone with my father and pull an African statue out of my closet. It didn't happen that way. I strategically placed the statue and other stereotypical things in the play, utilizing them as theatrical devices. I am trying to force you to think about the stereotypical ways in which we arrive at or judge Blackness. Understanding, of course, that Blackness is arrived at differently for each Black person, and as a group, Black people are not a monolith. Over the 15 years along this journey, I have discovered a useful set of tools, 7 to be exact, that can help lead to more authentic and meaningful conversations around topics of race and identity. The first tool might be the most obvious here, and that is to tell your story. Open up and listen. By sharing our personal stories, we discover our commonalities. If we are going to engage in a conversation about race and identity, we need to put our experience on the table first thing, so we know who's in the room and the depth of our experience. Look, the concept of identity is complex. It's shaped by individual characteristics, family dynamics, historical factors, and social and political contexts. Who am I? Do I identify with a group, a school, sports, a company, a religion, ethnicity, a race, gender, an age, disability, etc.? We all arrive at our identities in different ways. Even in an immediate family, a mother, father, son, and daughter, each will come to their own specific, unique identity in their own way. Oh, sure, yeah, okay, they may all share some things, traits, cultural aspects, but each will see themselves as differently. One may be more attracted to sports, another to the arts. One may find their bliss in baking, and yet another may strongly identify as a healer or a doctor. This holds true for every family, each person. We all have our own unique journey with identity. And it is important to recognize that identity is fluid. It is constantly changing. Look, there are obviously some things about us that do not change. Our skin color, our nationality, our gender, perhaps. However, the ways in which we identify may shift over our lives. Many changes happen over the course of our lives, which revise the way we see ourselves. Look, you'll graduate and you'll see yourself as a college graduate. Maybe you'll get married and then you'll see yourself as a husband or a wife, or you'll have kids and you'll see yourself as a parent, or your kids will have kids and then you'll see yourself as a grandparent, and on and on and on. It is, however, interesting that the way that we see ourselves is rarely the way others see us. And yet, it's my identity, not yours. James Baldwin said, "You cannot define me. I define myself. I cannot let anyone define who I am, whether I'm gay, whether I'm Black, whether I'm a writer, whether I'm this or that. This is my own responsibility to define myself. And I am not a finished product. I am always in construction because I learn, I have experience, and I see the world." The next tool is don't judge the differences. Flip the script. Instead of allowing the differences to create a wall between us, start by finding a mutual interest. Then embrace the differences. After all, if we were all the same, we'd be bored. It's the differences that make us stand out as people, and it's the differences that make us unique in the marketplace. We generally judge people from a first impression. We allow skin color, accents, different languages, differing sexual orientations, ideologies, religions, and more to separate us. Quite often, it is the first things we see that play an oversized role in the way we judge. It has been said that you only get one chance to make a first impression. These first impressions or judgments are sometimes referred to as unconscious biases, prejudices we have and are unaware of that distort the way we see people. If you suddenly find yourself judging based on difference, stop and ask yourself a question. Why? Why am I allowing a difference to dictate the way I perceive someone? Next up, tool number 3. We must recognize there isn't any one way to have a conversation about identity and race. We all have different experiences and therefore bring different points of view to the table. This is actually the strength of our collective spirit, our diversity. Look, there are many different methods used to try and help people understand race, identity, privilege, racism, bias, microaggressions, and other difficult topics. Some work more successfully than others, but not all work for all people. Some of you will walk away from this session thinking deeply about what I've said today. Perhaps it will spur other deeper conversations with colleagues, family, and friends. And some of you will walk away from this session thinking, damn, I can't get that time back. We're not all going to agree on what is the best method to discuss these issues. Again, because there isn't just one way to do it. Some may see this as diversity light. You may feel the conversation needs to confront racial inequality and the time for being polite is over. I would certainly agree with those, that these conversations are way past due. But I would suggest again that each of us responds to learning in different ways. We don't all read the same book and walk away with the same message. What is one person's Monet is another's canvas of blotches. Tool number 4. We can disagree so long as we're not disagreeable. We must take responsibility for the language we use. Freedom of speech carries responsibilities. It's important to point out that we all cherish our constitutionally guaranteed right to freedom of speech. But with that comes responsibility. Just as the cliche suggests, there is no free lunch, so too there is no free speech. What you say, the language you use, has an effect of which most of us never consider. There is not a person listening tonight, who has not been affected negatively by something someone has said to you. For some of us, we carry that hurt our entire lives. Others spend years in therapy, and for some, they just brush it aside, unaware of the psychic damage that lies beneath the surface. Some of us have been called names or spoken to in a derogatory way. Perhaps we've even been on the receiving end of some very harsh language. Words are like weapons, and we need to take care with how we use them. Recognize this and take responsibility for the language you choose to use. Studies have proven that anger spreads faster online than joy, sadness, or even disgust. Venting, contrary to what we've been told, makes us more likely to become aggressive rather than to serve as a therapeutic remedy. I might suggest limiting or eliminating social media, or as I like to call it, anti-social media. It is a dark path that fosters misinformation mixed with anger. Tool number 5, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Once people begin talking about their respective experiences, it may start to get uncomfortable. I know the idea of getting comfortable being uncomfortable sounds crazy, but we actually do something like this every day. Think about your day. There is probably something that happens over the course of an average day during which you feel uncomfortable. Whether we recognize this or not, we all experience something, some moment where we find we must work through an uncomfortable situation, whether it is with our kids, our spouse, an employee, our boss, a teacher, or God forbid, some authority figure. We all work through uncomfortable situations each day, and we're able to get through them. We can do the same with the conversation about race and identity. Rather, we must do the same. Tool number 6, understand that there are realities outside of your own experience. Just because we may not have experienced racism, sexism, homophobia, age discrimination, disability indifference, or other forms of discriminatory treatment, doesn't mean those are not realities for other people. Listen with empathy. Look, there is one thing that I think all of us on this call share, and that is we are all Americans. I want to ask a simple question in relationship to this. What does it mean to be an American? If you ask this question to a dozen different people, you would most likely get a dozen different answers. It means something different to each of us. And yet, we all share the title. That is what makes us all Americans, that we are different and yet all the same. But we assume that as Americans, we all share the same experience. How can we share the same American experience if we all see being American as slightly different? Open up, share, and listen. Finally, tool number 7, practice forgiveness. It has been described as the hardest work you will ever do, but also the most rewarding. How does one do this? It is important to note that you can forgive someone yet not condone their actions. It may be difficult to reconcile this, but just because we forgive someone does not mean we also condone their behavior. However, holding on to resentment is in essence holding on to anger and keeps us from moving on. It holds us in that spot continually. Letting go of anger and resentment can help propel us forward rather than holding us in place. I'd like to leave you with one last story that cements this idea of the importance of finding commonalities. And this is the opening story from my new book. Took place in early spring of 2019. And it was at that time that I found myself standing in a rather large, beautiful room at a significant federal agency in Washington, DC. And I was there to perform my one-man play for a group of federal employees in this extraordinarily ornate historic space on the invitation of the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, with whom I'd had a long-standing business relationship with over the past several years. They'd set up a makeshift stage with drapery as a backdrop, and they had chairs fanned out in a semicircle facing the stage area. And like many government agencies, there's a great deal of pomp and circumstances surrounding visits by speakers and presenters, and mine was no exception. I was whisked into another elaborately decorated and equally historic room to participate in the obligatory photo op with a senior administrator from the agency. Now, I had been warned earlier by my host that this particular administrator was not a big fan of her work. He had pushed back on the importance of diversity and saw efforts to create a workplace of inclusion as divisive at best. So when I met him, I was determined to win him over, utilizing the lessons I'd learned over the years of traveling, performing, and meeting people with doubts like his. I would find out who he is, what his story is, and search for our commonalities. So we did the obligatory smiling, handshaking as we discussed my visit and unusual approach to diversity. He spoke about his life in the private sector and how he'd spent time out on the West Coast, a connection we made almost immediately. And then he talked with great enthusiasm about a commitment to making a difference in government. And I expressed my admiration towards his sentiments about using his position to make a difference, and pointed out our common goal, mine through the use of my play, that is my life story. He became rather animated, and exuberant, and during our conversation, I definitely felt that we were making a connection. It was being forged. And so when it came time for my presentation, he decided that he would stay and sit in the back and perhaps give some closing remarks. Now, I need to tell you, I was totally taken aback by this, as was my host, because it had been my experience, having done presentations in numerous federal agencies, that head administrators rarely have time to stay and watch these types of programs, especially a one-man play. I mean, these are busy people. They have a lot on their plate. So with that, my host gave a brief introduction, and I commenced the show for an audience of rapt federal employees. And when I finished, I was overwhelmed as the group rose in applause, including the administrator, who stood in unison with the audience on my bow. And the audience and their enthusiasm carried over into the post-show dialogue, which eventually led to the administrator rising in his chair and approaching the stage to offer his closing remarks. Now, he had this huge smile plastered on his face, and he thanked me profusely, imploring the audience to reciprocate. And he continued by saying what a remarkable thing they'd all just experienced, one not soon to be forgotten, and how it might not be hyperbole to call this particular story, my story, a life-changing event for everyone. So I could tell he was deeply moved and shaken by the story and the resulting dialogue, as he kept struggling to put into words the strong emotions he felt. And then he held up his phone to me and he said, there's another remarkable similarity we share. I too had hair like yours when I was young. I guess you'd call it, and then he just sort of mumbled. He was unsure if it was proper of him to utter the term most often used to describe wild and curly Jewish hair, So as I'm looking at this faded photo of him on his phone screen, I blurted out, "You had a Jew fro," laughing. And then I reached out and I offered him a soul handshake, which he enthusiastically returned. The audience lost it, and the moment was sealed. We had connected on a deep level, and it was my personal story that took him along his own ride with identity. But the story's not over. I was told several days later by my host that during a senior level staff meeting the day following my presentation, this administrator stood up in front of the entire room full of leaders and praised my program. The one in which he rediscovered his Jew fro from the past, and the commonalities he shared with a guy, me, who looked just like him, but didn't actually have a Jew fro, but something else entirely. We have more in common than different. And hopefully, in my sharing this story and my own, you too have thought about not only your story, but stories of others. Those commonalities can be of an enormous help to us in both our work lives and outside. So I urge you to take action. Tell your story, and whether in person or via Zoom, create your own must-see TV. So thank you so much. That is the conclusion of my talk, but I would love to be able to field some questions from you. Oftentimes there's lots of things that come up over the course of a talk, over the course of the play. I've been coming to Penn State campuses for, as Jackie mentioned earlier, I don't even know how many years it's been. It's been over 10 years, I think, Jackie.
Oh, definitely over 10.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I've been to Wilkes-Barre numerous times, and a number of the other campuses which are here with us tonight. And again, I would love to be able to answer any kind of questions you might have. You might have some questions about my personal story that aren't necessarily answered in this little talk that I gave, and I'd be happy to answer those questions. Look, don't be ashamed of asking a personal question. I got nothing to hide. You may want to ask a question about some of the tools or how I came by them or whatever, and I'm happy to answer those questions as well. And I'm going to ask for Jackie's assistance to field some questions, if that's possible.
Absolutely. Michael, with a group this size, would you want people to unmic themselves or unmute themselves and actually ask, or put it in the chat, whichever anyone feels comfortable?
We can. I suppose we can hear some questions. I know it's we have a large group and it's difficult to people talking over one another. It might be easier to just write something in the chat window.
Okay.
But if you have something that you'd like to share, you have a burning desire, and you want to tell a little bit of your story or something, and you don't want to type it all out, I'm happy to listen and to answer your question. So either or, I guess, is why I'm hedging my bets on that.
Well, there was one comment that said that was a great story. So,
okay.
And I guess I will. Well, this program is new for me. I have seen Incognito numerous times. My children grew up with Incognito. I think the first time they saw it, they were maybe, I'm going to say 8 and 10. And then my son approached you when he was 18 at Penn State Berks and was like, "I've seen you before."
Oh, right.
Yes.
Right.
So that was fantastic.
Yes.
I think one of the things that just totally jumped out, and I have been taking notes, but I love how you said it is my responsibility to define myself. And I think I just see so, especially young people, but even, someone my age being so influenced by society and by, Facebook and you name it, there's so much pressure that, you know, aside from your 7 tools of, starting these conversations, what might you say to us that we that work with, the 18 to 22-year-olds for the most part, just to help them to understand the importance of, defining themselves?
Yes, well, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a great quote. That's actually from James Baldwin.
Right.
And who is, if you have not read any James Baldwin, race out and read something immediately. He was one of the most amazing thinkers, Black writer, amazing thinker, intellectual, incredible. I have to say, and this may sound odd, but so in particular, when you're in your late teens and early 20s, it feels like that's a really volatile period for a lot of people. At least for me, it was. I guess I'll just speak for me. When I was that age, when I was in college, I was trying to figure out where I fit in, who I fit in with. I did a lot of really, I'm not going to deny it, I did a lot of foolish things because I felt like maybe I felt like the pressure to fit in with this group or that group, or do what this group was doing or what that group was doing. And eventually realized, as time went on, that I didn't need to do that I didn't need to just succumb to the pressure because it felt uncomfortable to me to do that. And I want you to know, young people are in that age, that those kinds of things still exist. I mean, that what I'm speaking of still existing is that as you get older, you're still trying to figure out where you fit in and how you define yourself. And as I mentioned in the talk, that's an ongoing, lifelong journey. It's not like you get to a certain place in your life and you go, that's it, I know who I am, I'm done. Things keep happening to us, and it changes the way that we see each other and that we see ourselves in particular. And again, it's so important to recognize that the way that I see myself is probably not the way you see me. I mean, there may be some people on this call tonight who will go, well, I heard this biracial guy talk, or some people may say, I heard this white guy talk, or some people may say, I heard this Black guy talk, or whatever, you know what I mean? Now you have taken my identity and decided to put something on it. Again, that happens to each of us, all of us. We see ourselves in a unique way, and yet others see us differently the way we see ourselves. And partially that's because we're not sharing enough of who we are with other people. And again, I can't reinforce it enough. That first tool, tell your story. I tell my story, and I mean, the comment, it was a great story. I hear this constantly. People come up to me. Oh, I got a text message from my sister yesterday, who's in the story. And she told me about a writer that she'd been working with. My sister's an art curator, an artist and an art curator, and she had this person working with her who's a writer who helps her write some of the captions for the artwork that she hangs on the walls of the gallery that she manages. And somehow she told her about my story, and the woman was just really intrigued. And so she gave her a copy of my book, and she read it, and she wrote back to my sister, and she was so blown away because she didn't. Now, again, it's not like she had the same journey. It's not like she, suddenly found out that she was half Black. She didn't, that wasn't her journey, but she was on a journey of trying to figure out who she was and where she fit in. And my journey really resonated with her on that level, because we all go on that journey, no matter what. And so I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that's important to recognize that we're all on that journey, and it's a journey that you go on your entire life. And there will be times when you're going to feel uncomfortable, and there will be times when you're going to feel really comfortable, but you get to define who you are, not others. You make that determination.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
We do have a question. Actually, Pam, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for everything that you shared. I'm Pam. I work at Penn State Lehigh Valley, and I have been working with our diversity and inclusion programming probably for about the past 4 years, and I have learned so much from our student stories. We have very diverse background, and when I first started taking on these programs, I thought, well, how am I, as a white woman of my age, going to be able to do this effectively? And our students have been so wonderful about sharing their stories. But here's a challenge that I face in my own life with my own family, and I would guess that there are some students in this case as well. I approach everything with empathy, and I was having a conversation with a family member yesterday about a session I was on last week, the epic rap battles of Black history, and it was a really educational program. And I was talking to her about something that we learned on there, Colin Kaepernick and LeBron James. And I said, I learned a lot about that I just really didn't know. And she started talking all kinds of things. And what are your suggestions on helping people in our circle, in our family, of our friends? You said number 6, understand that there are realities outside of your own experiences.
Yes.
I get that. How do we communicate that to other people in our lives? Do you have any good suggestions for that?
Yes, that's a tough one. Because I've had this conversation with not only my wife, but friends about trying to recognize that we're all different people, that we're all unique, and yet we're all people. We're all it's a moment in the talk when I was talking about we're all Americans, but we wouldn't all define American the same way. That's a perfect example. I mean, if you want to just use that question, just pose that question to a room full of people. You're going to get a room full of different answers. And that's the point. We all see it differently. And yet we all wear that title. And so I think it's important to understand that, we don't have, how could I possibly understand what it's like to walk in a disabled person's shoes or a gay person's shoes, or if I'm not that? And that's not to suggest that that's wrong. It's just we need to be open to hearing that person's story, because that person's story is different than my story. And yet it also has similarities because we share a universal human experience. That's without a doubt, we all share that. And so, using a question like that, like how would you define, what does it mean to be an American? And having people write it out. Or another exercise I would use is in a room full of people, in a circle of people, write down how you would describe the person sitting next to you and see how different it is from that person's actual definition of how they see themselves. It's different, and pointing out these different realities will help us understand more that they actually exist, and that exists outside of our experience. That's great, Pam. I'm really glad you're doing that work, and I hope that helps.
Thanks.
Do we have anybody else who had a question that they might like to ask or know, or?
Please just put it in the chat, because otherwise I'll keep asking.
Yeah.
I will keep asking. Michael, you talked about, well, I'm going to step back a second here. So at the beginning of each semester, each year, we do our orientation, and, we always, I'm the first person to say, I love icebreakers, but most people are like, not another icebreaker. But the point of the icebreakers is for me to engage students with each other. Yes. And the first way of doing that is for them to find out some, commonalities, yes, things that they like, so that they, it'll never fail. We have a particular club on campus where, it's an outdoors club, 4 seasons. And I love when we get students who are like, wow, I've never been able to go horseback riding, but that's one of the things the club does. And just those simple things I have seen such friendships grow. Yeah. Between people who are totally different from all over the country. But again, as you said, it's finding those common things. And so yeah. I don't know if you want to just.
I've got an icebreaker for you. This is great because it breaks the ice, and it also helps people understand something that we do constantly, and all the time we do this. So when you bring people together for orientation and so there's a room full of a group of people who don't know one another, and you pair people up so people pair up with someone that they don't know, and don't allow them to talk. So the pairs just pair up. They can say their names. That's it. And then each person has a piece of paper and a pen, and they write down on that piece of paper, they're going to look at the person they're paired with, and they're going to write down 5 things that they think their partner, their pair, likes. Write down 5 things that you think that person likes based on what you see in front of you. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So let's say I'm paired up with somebody. I'm paired up with Lucas, and Lucas has on a is that a Keystone shirt, right? So I would say, the first thing I would say, well, Lucas likes the Keystone College, or whatever. I mean, it could be a sports team. It's Keystone Tigers, or I don't know what your mascot is, or whatever. And so I'm going to write that down in the first line, and then in the next section, for each of those 5 things that you wrote down, you're going to write down how you came to that understanding. So if I wrote Lucas likes the Keystone College, I'd write in the second column, I would write because he's wearing a Keystone shirt. Okay. And then you do 5 more. I have to do 5 more things with Lucas or whoever that pair, and you write them down only on what you see. You cannot talk to one another. You're doing this only by what you see. First column, what they like. Second column, what led you to that understanding of what they like. And then in the third column, when each person has finished writing down their 5 things, then both of you share what those things are, your deductions, how you deduce them. And then in the third column, you would write down whether you were right or wrong, or whatever the observation was that came from that exercise. And there's a number of things that are going on in that exercise. This is something that we do all the time. We see people that we've never seen before, and we are judging them immediately. When I came on the screen tonight, you judged me before I even spoke, and then while I first started speaking. That's a fact. We all do it. It's and I'm not condemning it or condoning it. I'm just saying it's something we do, and we race to these judgments based on things we see. Look at those glasses he's wearing. Oh, those are weird, or that's a strange shirt. I don't like that shirt, or he looks like my uncle, or he has gray hair. Whatever it might be, you're judging me. It's okay. It's not okay, but we all do it. And so this puts you in an uncomfortable position when you're doing this with the partner, because you are judging that person based on what you see without any information, and they are doing the same. And it probably will make you feel a little uncomfortable doing it. And then you go through that exercise, and then following that, talk about those things, talk about what you learned, talk about what it made you feel, talk about how it made you feel, not only looking at someone without information, but being looked at without giving any information. There's so many things going on in that, and it breaks the ice and opens up people to have a deeper understanding that we need more information from one another in order to understand who we are. So I would leave you with that.
That was fantastic.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Sure. If we have another question, I'm happy to answer it, but we are at 6:05. I don't know what how long do we go?
Well, wait, if anyone has a question, how about another 5 minutes? If that's okay, if anyone has a question,
Sure.
please put it in the chat. No, it's a quiet group tonight.
My group. That's all right. I get it. We've been online, I get this too. As I was sharing with the group of student activity leaders here, I was saying I did some classes for Carnegie Mellon in the fall, and I understand the complexities of everyone being online all the time. I'm online all the time giving these speeches and sharing my play, and I understand the uncomfortableness with that. And I guess I'm just I'm encouraging you to reach out to people whenever you can. I mean, this is, it's crazy the situation we find ourselves in, but the thing that can help is by sharing our stories. It really can. And even if you're sharing it on Zoom, it's bound to help. And I know how uncomfortable it is to just like talk to someone new that you've never talked to before. I used to be incredibly uncomfortable with that, which seems kind of odd that I went into the acting field and then got into this, and then I was really uncomfortable speaking in front of groups of people, but now I'm completely comfortable with it because I'm completely comfortable with who I am and telling my story. And own your story, own who you are.
Mhm. Fantastic. There was a comment that said, "This is valuable and I appreciate it."
Great. I hope you find it of value. I hope, again, you know, you're either going to walk away having conversations about this, or you're going to walk away going, "Oh, that was a wasted hour." I mean, and that's the fact, and I'm okay with that too. Again, as I said, we don't all read the same book and walk away with the same message. We have to. But if you're at the end of this, if you are kind of thinking, "Yeah, you know, I don't know, that wasn't so great," or whatever, I just want you to stop for a minute and think about the way that you see yourself and the way that you look at other people. If anything you can walk away with from this is just start thinking about that, about the ways in which we do that. And we do it so unconsciously. So having an awareness of it is the first part of becoming conscious to it.
Great.
Oh, what do we have here?
What we have to start with is to accept others despite their backgrounds. What do you think?
Start
we-
with backgrounds, but despite their.
Despite his or her background.
Well, yes. I mean, again, this would go there. We all come from different places. We all have these unique and wonderful stories, but we're not sharing them with one another. And we all come from, like, I'm thinking about this the other day. So people who are, I'm a city dweller. I've been in big cities, a big city dweller, not just that city. I'm a big city dweller. I live in Chicago. I'm coming to you live from Chicago. I live in Chicago. I've lived in Chicago for a very long time. I love big cities. I've spent a lot of time in New York. I lived in Los Angeles for a very long time. These are huge cities, but the way that shaped my view of the world is different than the way that some of you who have grown up in rural areas or small towns or whatever, or on a farm somewhere, wherever it might be. That's the way those experiences shape the way in which we view the world. They shape what I call our lens. And so we need to, in order for us to come together and understand again, and I can't emphasize this enough, it is a fact, we have more in common than we have different. And in order for us to discover that, we have to open up our lens. So me, as a big city dweller, I've got to open up my lens to people who haven't been exposed to the masses of amounts of people that I'm used to, people who have come from not only physical differences in terms of geography and whatnot, but also the kinds of things that we learn growing up, the kinds of things that we are exposed to growing up are different from place to place. And we have to open up our lens to understand that different people with different backgrounds don't mean that we don't still have a lot in common. We have to find out what those things are. So we got to talk to one another. Tell your story. I'm sounding like a broken record now.
No.
Boy, the record. What is he talking about, record?
Oh,
Vinyl's
Michael,
back.
You had shared with me some information on the 7 steps, and can I share that with the advisors that are on here today?
Yes,
And
there's
then,
an
go ahead.
electronic version of those 7
Yes.
tools. Please give that to
I
all the
have it.
advisors. And those of you who are on the Zoom tonight, you can contact the advisor at your respective institution to get that tool from the tool card from them. It's also on my website. I think you can download it there. It's incognitotheplay.com. If you're interested in a book, you can order a book there. The new book is the title of the talk. Nobody wants to talk about it. The old book, the memoir, is there as well, Incognito. There's all kinds of other information and videos at the website if you're interested in learning more. There, Jackie's got a book right there. Thank you, Jackie.
There it is.
Yeah. But yes, please share those tools. Yeah. All right.
It's a wonderful book. It's wonderful. Yes.
All right. Well, I guess I'm going to say thank you to everybody. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jackie, for our years of friendship and working together and collaborating. And I hope it will continue into the future. And all of the other advisors here today, thank you again for joining in and being a part of this and bringing your campus to this event. I hope you're one of the people who walk away wanting to talk about this more and share more, and not walking away like the person going, oh, I just wasted an hour of my time.
Listen, thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to
bet.
the other Penn State campuses and Keystone College that collaborated on this event tonight. Again, I cannot thank you enough. Let's hope that next year this will be in person.
Live, in person.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. And I love this because, hey, at last time Michael was on our campus, it snowed and you got stuck in a hotel and couldn't get back home. And guess what? It's every time that we have talked, since January, every single time it has snowed. So,
Right. I would love to come back and do the play live again. So
excellent.
we'll make that
Excellent.
happen.
Well, listen, thank you, students. Thank you for being here. I will be sending the chat to your advisors, and they could share with faculty members if need be. Thank you, Montalto, Altoona, Wilkes-Barre. Who am I missing?
Lehigh Valley.
Thank you. And I know I'm missing someone else in Keystone. Thank
Keystone.
you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for being here tonight.
All right, y'all. Take care now.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.